You're listening to the RyAngle Podcast, starring Ryan Hoger and Ryan Eastwood, and sometimes other people named Ryan. And now, here are some Ryans. Ooh. All right.
Hey there.
We're back.
We're back. Here we are, two Ryans.
There we are, two Ryans. This is the RyAngle episode. I was going to say episode 2, but we've decided that this is episode 1.
Yeah, because the last one was episode 0, and so this will be episode 01.
The last one was a prequel to something that doesn't yet exist.
Yeah. A pilot, if you will. And today we were going to talk about midlife crises.
Yeah. We were going to title this one the Existential Midlife Crisis. As opposed to the maybe popular conception of a midlife crisis. Because we're better than that. And I want
we want to tell everybody how much better we are.
Yeah. This is a crisis of really being too thoughtful and intelligent.
Yeah.
Is what the issue is.
So we're going to talk to each other about how we're just really too insightful for our own good, and hope that our listeners can help us come to terms with being more intelligent than, well, them and the general populace.
Yeah, of course, because otherwise I'm just a person who's staring down the barrel of his 40s, who's feeling his virility and relevance slowly slipping away. The only thing in a long, sloping downward hill to the grave that is not only in sight, but predictable. And,
I think we can really just cut it right there. Like, we just said everything that needs to be said.
Yeah. Well, this came about because Ryan H. was visiting me, Ryan E., in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and it was the first time we'd really gotten to hook up quite a bit and talk a lot in quite some time. And we were both at what we thought were like different stages in our lives, but there's a lot of overlap there, because I don't know if anyone will ever listen to this that doesn't know us, but Mr. Hoger has children who are ages, how old are they now?
8 and 11.
8 and 11.
Oren just turned 11.
It was really fun hanging out with them.
I bet it was.
I was glad.
That looked fun.
We got delayed. Oh my goodness. Yeah, Yuri is so much more verbose than he was before, and he's so like thoughtful when he speaks. It's like it's funny. Like, it makes me want to laugh, but I don't, like, I'm not laughing at him in any sort of mocking way. It's just so surprising. He'd be like, I think that things are like this, but well, considering this and, not accepting this other thing, but it's this way. And I'm like, what child speaks this way?
And then he's still got that super high baby voice too. It's really a little surreal.
Yeah, he's kind of like the little girl in Dune, not the movie, that hasn't come up yet, but in the book, Aliyah, who's born with wisdom beyond her years, and she just creeps everybody out because she's
Yeah, he's got that a little bit.
So we wanted to go over, in part of the mission of the podcast being to bring some of the difficulties of life and unavoidably from a male context in our way. Not that women don't have to deal with this same thing, but I know that we're just not as good at talking about our feelings and what we're going through as women, and we're usually not terribly supportive of each other or reaching out. I mean, some men are, but it seems rare, and we're trying to encourage that. So let's chat about life and how being middle-aged things are going. I'm 37. Are you 38?
Also 37. I'll be
also 37. Okay. And how is that going?
It's been going all right. The last year has been just recently. I had kind of a couple of realizations that have been helping it go all right. But it feels like a lot of the last couple of years has been really coming to terms with. So when I was in my 20s, I was basically planning on being a professional artist and actively pursuing that. And then in my mid-20s, I had my first child, who we've discussed, and that I spent a couple of years kind of flailing around, still trying to make professional artwork, and then realizing that that's not gonna I'm not gonna be able to pay the bills with this in a manner that would work with dependents, and having to then find other sources of income and other skills, which I did, and now 12 years later, I'm fairly secure in those finances and like baseline skills, but found myself sort of hearkening back to the person I was before that, and feeling like something was lost, something is missing, like the whole freedom and sense of endless possibility and creativity and willingness to spend a lot of time and a lot of effort focusing on those things, and then being able to look at that through the sober lens of adulthood and saying the reason it feels like that is because it's true. And I think that's a lot. I feel like that's the hardcore at the center of this whole midlife crisis thing, is because you're looking back at this sort of lost youth, and it's accurate. You're no longer in your 20s with no dependents. Like, that's not true anymore.
Yeah, I think that there's this that it seems maybe it's just a truism to say this, but it is unique in the sense that you have something to look back on, and you also have this forward thing to look at. And part of this existential crisis is that you can see in both directions very, very clearly. And are you leaning, like, was there a part of you at some point that was kind of like avoiding looking at that with clarity, like your actual position in life, for fear of, I don't know, just confronting that ball of emotions that's inevitable around this age?
What do you mean about looking at my position in life now, like kind of soberly recognizing that here I am at the midpoint?
Yeah, like, do you want it to, like, how has it been taking stock? Like, when did you start to do that and look around and get your bearings and try to decide how you feel about the past and what you're going to shape the future into?
Yeah, probably about a year and a half ago. Before that there was several years of just being vaguely dissatisfied and not really knowing why. And then, kind of starting to crystallize more the last year and a half or so.
And I wonder if that sense of like some kind of dissatisfaction, I've wondered if that's inevitable, because I think you do reach this point. You go, is this unique to me? Is this an inevitable thing that happens when you reach a middle age, or is this a result of my choices? Specifically, like, is there a way to get here and still feel that nothing is missing and everything is good and we're on the right trajectory, and not even have to take stock and rethink and just continue powering to the future on whatever rainbow sled you fashioned for yourself?
And I feel like a lot of that has to do with personal circumstances and world circumstances as well. This is one thing I've been kind of weighing regarding that whole question, is the kind of sense of youth and boundless opportunity of 15 years ago versus kind of the unsettling despair of the last several years. And we've made it very explicit that this show is not a political show per se, but we also don't ignore the events of our times. The last few years have been very unsettling.
Yeah.
And kind of wondering along with that whether that sense of unsettlingness is actually a response to the times, or whether it's also kind of something that grows out of this stage in your life where suddenly you're old enough that you've been paying attention to these things for a very long time, and you've been around long enough to see that they are not getting better, and also come to terms with the full realization that even if you became the most effective version of yourself that you possibly could be, you personally are not going to have that much of an effect on the trajectory of the world. You're just mid-frame in a very unflattering.
You're cutting out on me hardcore here. Hold on.
It's pretty amusing. So, we've kind of made a real point to make this show not a political show. So we're not making this a political show, and we're not making it exclusively about politics. But then we also are not ignoring the times that we're living in with climate change and political unrest and some general craziness of the last several years. In case anyone's listening to this for posterity, it's 2021 now. And sort of that sense of vague unease about the trajectory of the world and trajectory of your life, part of me wonders how much of that is actually a response to that middle life and how much of it is a response to the events happening around us. Because this last several years has been very unsettling and very much a feeling of things getting worse, and maybe they're not going to get better. We're just going to watch them steadily get worse. But then at the same time, that middle age, it seems like you're also getting old enough to realize that even if you did somehow magically become the best and most effective version of yourself that you could possibly be, like magically right now, you're still personally not going to have all that much effect on the trajectory of the world and what's happening. And I wonder whether that kind of feeling of realizing that, I mean, it's not like it's the first time things have been fucked up, and how much the feeling of things being so like grinding towards their inevitable end is actually just a reflection of that inner process of, I'm going to live until I die, and I'm basically being tossed by the waves of an uncaring sea of humanity. And that's how it is. I didn't ask to be here, but here I am, and this is how it'll be until it ends someday, and I don't know how or why.
Yeah. Any delusions you had about your possible like relevance or grandeur are really starting to be humbled. There's a couple things going on there. I think one, I've thought about the just a general sense of unease, and the way this relates to middle age might just become you being aware of it and just trying to financially support yourself. But I think some of this is a symptom of the modern world, because no matter what like line of work you in or where you live, everything is moving so fast and it's so fungible that the ground is always shifting under your feet, right? So even if you're settled into a nice career, the circumstances that you thrive in, like the economic, socio-political circumstances, can change in a heartbeat, right? So for us, with shipping, we're both in shipping, all kinds of things could affect that. Laws, the Jones Act that requires that some ships be manned by U.S. personnel, that could change. Just whatever line of work you're in, you have to be so nimble. I can't imagine what kind of work you'd be in where you'd actually feel settled. I don't know, maybe government work, like a job as a teacher or something. Not that pays great, but they're probably going to continue to need teachers, and that's not going to change very much. Whereas if you imagine, let's say you're part of some tribe in Tasmania 1,000 years ago. Hey man, how do we make a living? Well, the animals that we hunt show up at this time at this prairie every year after the equinox. There's these natural rhythms of the earth that you're plugged into, and you kind of know what life is going to be, which I don't know, maybe sounds boring to modern sensibilities, but there's a bit of a security in that, and should something go wrong, there's people around to take care of you. Whereas we're so independent, especially in the United States, that if you come on hard times, you're mostly shit out of luck, and you might have some family or friends that would take you in, but it's kind of like frowned upon and looked as a temporary circumstance. So I think there's just part of that is realizing that like there is no truly secure place to be in the world, especially economically.
We're in pretty much as ground zero, like bedrock of an industry as you can get. We ship petroleum products, and honestly, I'm looking around and saying in 10 years I might not be able to find a job in this anymore.
Yeah. I know.
Not that it won't be happening at all, but that there really might not be a place for me in it in 10 years.
Mm-hmm. And there's the insecurity that comes along with the other things are going to shit. Your body. This might sound morbid, but like feeling the fact that you're slowly dying in a visceral way every day isn't great. It's not.
No,
Well, 'cause there's all kinds of things
ideal.
that I told myself that I would do, and you think like, oh, I'm not going to be like those people and get all lazy and go to bed early and all this stuff. But it's like I didn't count on the fact that I would just be tired a lot of the time, very very tired.
And you start being like, well, okay, I got up and I cleaned the kitchen. That is a good day.
Yeah. So this sense that you're never going to be able to affect anything. Is there something like in particular that you wanted to affect, or is it like that that your artwork would just go out into the world and just be diluted and dispersed like a drop of food coloring in the ocean and not be able to be seen again? Is there something you would like to be able to affect if you had ultimate omnipotence?
Well, actually, the process of the last 6 months is realizing that no, actually, I don't really want to do that. Then I feel like that's maybe I'm starting to poke through to the other end of the whole thing. Because actually, this might be kind of a transition, but this last few months has been breaking, I feel like, kind of through a lot of that. If I was going to say one thing that I wanted to like change the world on and crusade about, I mean, maybe I was more idealistic than most, but back in my 20s and late 20s, early 30s, I really wanted to change everything, like fucking economics, politics, the way things were made, manufacturing. You're younger and you think you know the best thing for everything. I guess it's kind of a teenage thing to say, but I'm like, oh yeah, shit should be like this. What's wrong with stuff? Why don't people know that I know how to do things right?
Yeah, I was thinking I don't think I've had that on a world scale so much, but back when I was religious, I was very much that way. I was, reading the Bible and coming up with my own idealistic vision of what being like a good Christian or a good church would be and what that would look like. And I felt this zeal to be like an agent of change in that particular, in that particular organization or that particular context. I mean, if you believe this stuff is true, like if you believe in all the Jesus stuff, then the church is kind of the highest organization because it's carrying out the will of the Almighty on earth, right? So the stuff that people are doing over in Washington is kind of piddly by comparison.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. I mean, and if you really truly believe that, then that's an extremely rational viewpoint.
Yeah, this is something that people don't understand about a lot of religious extremists is they're very, like Osama bin Laden is a very rational person, right?
Yeah.
This is not a crazy person. He's making very rational choices based on wrong assumptions about the way that the world is. But
very different hierarchy of what's important.
But still very rational, yeah, and that's where I was at. Like, why wouldn't we put all of our energy into this thing? And then I went through this long period of trying to figure out what it means to live a good life. And I came to a conclusion that to be able to say what is a good life or not is really you looking for a story, a narrative, and such a story about yourself and about the world doesn't exist. You need to have any good story. You need a starting point. Here's where we came from. Here's where you're going. And in the meantime, here's what you need to do the good things. Okay. But the fact is, we don't know where we came from. Okay. We've got this story about the Big Bang, but what the hell is before that? Like, there's no saying what's going on, and there's no knowing where this is going. The only certainty is you're not going to be here for very long. You just don't, the context around your life is completely unknowable. There's no way to say, well, this was a good outcome, this is a bad outcome. There is no, that is to say, no objective story, no objective context to your life that you can possibly frame it in that tells you, oh, I led a good life while I was on this earth. And that kind of blew my mind because I had sought around and fishtailed in different directions, looking at Buddhism, but I came to realize these are all just doing the same thing for me. This is all just trying to add a story and context to my life, and that such a thing doesn't exist. And you come out on the other side of that, and you feel like you're just floating in space, and it's like, well, what the hell now? And I'm a nihilist now in an objective sense. Like I don't think there is an objectively meaningful life. I think that it's all the sum total of all human activity is zero, right? It all adds up to the heat death of the universe, so far as we can tell. Like, that's it, man. Sorry. You think of Carl Sagan's pale blue dot and just how tiny and insignificant this whole thing is. But at the risk of getting way too cheeseball about it, that's what those Tibetan like sand mandala paintings are, right? You build this beautiful thing, and you realize that, for people who don't know what this is, they build these extremely intricate patterns that take forever, very, very delicately with colored sand, and then at the end you just sweep it away. And what is the meaning of such a thing? It was beautiful in the time that it was beautiful. And so where I've settled on is simply that each individual is a unique pattern in the world, and that the good life is a pattern, is you as that pattern expressing yourself in the most you way possible, unhindered by fear and delusion. And that brings, like, what else is there to do? That's basically where I've landed, and that could be someone's pattern being what it is. We could say that, like, somebody like Donald Trump, oh, that's an evil person doing evil things with his life, but maybe it's not. Maybe he's just being the most that version of that thing possible, and it's something that the universe is doing in this way to just create this novel insanity, and that's a good life, well lived. So how I try to think about this in the context of myself is I'm just like, what are things that are unique to me, that I uniquely have passions or insights about, that I don't, just basically, what do I feel like doing? Just do that more, right? And is that, I think that's threatening to people, because that seems like hedonism or something. So do you view... I think you kind of have an intuition, if I read you right, that is what a good life is for yourself and your own expression through your art. Is that how do you think about what it means to have lived a good life, and do you think you've lived one up until this point?
Yeah, I have a beer here, so I'm gonna cheers to that.
Cheers
to whatever a good life is.
Yeah, I'm drinking water with some baking soda in it because I have acid reflux because I'm middle-aged.
Cut the podcast.
That's your pro tip. You tuned in if you're middle-aged. If you get a little burning in your throat, just add a little teaspoon of some baking soda and some water.
Maybe
that'll help.
Put some in my beer.
Yep.
There's what the good life looks like always reminds me of there's an Alan Watts quote about we always thought that there was a meaning or a purpose of life, and the purpose of life was to get to that end, wealth or success for whatever it was. But we missed the whole point of the whole thing all along, that the life was a song, and you were meant to dance while the music was being played. And I feel like that really encapsulates my intentions toward living a good life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the process of actually living up to that, I feel like, is much more difficult, which is ironic because I think the method in which to do that really is just to take whatever it is as it comes, whether that's career, money, poverty, art, men and women, friendship, whatever it is, as it comes, you just accept it, and that would be living your best life, as far as I can imagine, which I feel like, again, is a very Buddhist concept, that you respond to what comes as it comes, and then move on. which is such an ideal as to be effectively impossible in actual existence as far as my experience goes. But I'm gonna talk a little bit about the last few months because I feel like this is a good place to throw it in. So one thing that I realized recently was how much. So I feel like I'm just again, I'm gonna repeat myself one more time to set the stage here. Just the last few months, I've been kind of breaking through that kind of general malaise and feeling like I can't do the things I want, with the other side of that whole what you do is meaningless and is never going to really have a meaningful effect on society. Because on the one side you can look at that and go, oh no, woe is me, I'll never be important. On the other hand, you can go, oh, woe is me, I'll never be important, who gives a fuck, so I can do whatever I want, right? And there's
it removed a lot of pressure. I remember feeling that was a big, like, along with I don't even remember feeling despair around that realization. It might sound morbid to people that haven't had it, but I remember feeling this tremendous sense of relief that I didn't have to live up to something, in this case, God's expectations or whatever.
And I've intellectually been there for a while, but emotionally not so much. Like, definitely feeling the weight of the oppression of shit. What can I do to make the world better? How can I be more altruistic? How can I live up to these moral guidelines that I've been indoctrinated with? How can I live up to all of these? Like, to be, a good father, a good provider, a selfless altruist, wealthy, a philanthropist, have a six-pack, all of them. Because these are all the things that we've been told that these things are important in order to say that you are doing your best or whatever. And definitely the process of saying fuck it has been very liberating. But the thing that I realized specifically is that I've picked up an internal voice I picked it up to around my late 20s, I think is when it really started kicking in, when I did some questionable business adventures. And by questionable, I mean not well thought out, and they failed, as they do.
Of your own, like businesses you tried to start or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I was a massage therapist at the time, and I tried to do some crazy energy work healing at exorbitant prices that didn't really have a lot of backing and didn't really make any sense. And everybody looking in on it said that's not a great idea. And I said, fuck you, and I'm doing it anyway, and it didn't work. And I had kids to support, so it not working actually had consequences, as opposed to my early 20s when it did not have consequences. And so I think I traced back to about then, because if I had really a lot of negative self-talk going and kind of undermining internal voices, I never would have had the confidence to pursue that. So I think that I can reasonably say that my really intense undermining self-talk came up around then. Just the one saying you're a shitty guitar player, nobody likes to listen to you, you can't draw very well, you're a fake in your job, everybody has these voices, right? Everybody has this.
I think it's being popularized right now. I think it's
everybody does.
Yeah, more so in America, I think. But yeah, it's being popularized as what they call imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just the constant negative self-talk. But what I realized, and what was keeping me from pinning it down and saying that's just an intrusive thought, is that the voices were in the voices of people who are dear to me. I might have your voice in my head saying, Ryan, the things you're saying are boring. Why would you even do this? And realizing recently that that's not you talking, that's me talking. Just because it's in your voice in my head, it's still my internal dialogue. There's nothing objective about that.
Some little collection of neurons in the back of your gray matter is I'm just gonna be an asshole.
I'm just gonna be a dick. Yeah, I'm just gonna be a huge asshole. And that was one of and segueing back to our previous episode when we were talking about pursuing art as a career, which I have done to a point where I feel like I can talk pretty intelligently about the effects of it. That when you're attempting to learn to draw or paint very realistically, it's one thing you got to learn to just accept that you're going to have this negative self-talk, and it's going to be brutal. It's going to be vicious. You're going to have this internal voice telling you that you're worthless. You'll never learn this. It's impossible for you to learn this. You should give up now. And it just doesn't stop. It just keeps rattling along. So this isn't a new phenomenon for me. I've been painting realistically for 20, 25 years. Like, I know what that voice sounds like. But at some point, it turned into the voices, instead of my voice telling me I was shit, it turned into people who I love and are dear to me in my head telling me that I was shit. And that is much more insidious and much harder to ignore. And realizing recently, as I did, that it's all just negative self-talk. There's no other voices in your head but your voice. Just because you're imitating your wife's voice doesn't mean your wife thinks you're shit.
Yeah, mine has almost always been. I think mine has always been my own judgment. I don't think I've ever experienced it as other people's. But I'm a very harsh critic.
But you can tell yourself to fuck off too.
Yeah, you can tell yourself to fuck off. My mental coping strategy is usually just like, all right, what else are we gonna do? I'm kind of a dick back to the voice in my head that says. But it's hard, especially in a creative enterprise. Mine's that I've been getting into lately is writing, and I'll have this one part of my soul that's like, do the thing, and I'm like, I will do the thing, and I sit down at my desk and I go tippity typity type, and then the other voice pipes in. It's like, this is fucking garbage. Like, we should just eat Doritos and sit on the couch. What are you waiting?
Kill yourself. It's like, come on, man.
Yeah, maybe jumping out a window would help society a bit more. I was watching this. I never left my head. I watched this documentary on it was people who are graphic designers of all things, and there was this woman was in it, and she said, I never slowed down because I never had fear. And I went, fuck you. Kind of like, that must feel amazing. I don't know what that's like. But she said, I always had energy because I never had fear. I thought that was so interesting. And here's this person, she was probably like 60 years old when she's saying this. Never slowed down, never lost my energy because I never had fear. I don't know how you're born without ever having fear, and I take that to mean, no negative self-talk or thinking, what if this doesn't work out, sort of a thing. You're just doing stuff in the world. That's kind of the optimal way to be. I don't know if that's... I wish I'd had more experience with, like, Eastern cultures. I don't know how American or Western, that is. And speaking of, what you reminded me of something else when you were talking about the Alan Watts quote, which is beautifully animated by Trey Parker and Matt Stone.
Really?
You haven't seen that? Yeah. So
No.
his diatribe about life being about, how a symphony isn't about the crescendo. That's not the point. The point is the music all along the way, and if you weren't dancing the whole time, you really missed the point. If you were just waiting to get to the end of the thing, right? The point is enjoyment as it goes along. So I was listening to this lecture by Kurt Vonnegut, who wrote Slaughterhouse-Five, among a million other things, and he was lamenting the loss of the typewriter. And he shared this anecdote of going about his day and just what it was like to finish a manuscript on his typewriter and package it all up and put it in the manila envelope. And he went into detail about how the little flap feels when you close it and the buttons, and how he did this little jaunty walk down the street to go to the post office, and how he was feeling sexy and winked at the lady that works at the post office and the whole thing. And I thought about that, and what was his point? His point was that, like, yes, it was an argument for aesthetics, because it's more efficient to use a word processor. But he was like, screw you, I'm having fun. This is fun, right? And the older I got, the more I think, like, almost everything is about aesthetics. That aesthetics really has, like, that might seem trivial when you say it, but aesthetics has a kind of deep meaning. So he concluded that story with, he said, the meaning of life is to fart around, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. He's telling this group of students this, and that's what he's saying. He's saying the point is to enjoy yourself while it's happening. So why get into shipping? I felt bad for the kids in school who said, oh, well, I can get this job and I can make this money, and that'll be so nice if I get this job and have this money. And, oh, it would be so much smarter for you, speaking to me, being in the engine department because you have more opportunities for jobs and you make more money. And all that's true. But at the end of the day, I just like it. I like the aesthetics of being on a bridge with charts and looking at the ocean. It suits me. It feels nice. It feels right. And honestly, how else are you going to choose a car or a mate or a house or anything like this? Like, what are their but aesthetic choices? And maybe it's freeing just to feel some meaning in that, to say, like, I find this circumstance that I'm in or this thing I'm employed in doing aesthetically pleasing. It's a thing I like about writing. I like sitting down at a desk. I like the sound of typing. I like how it feels on my hands, and I imagine I'm sure for an artist it's very much the same. You like kinesthetically how it feels in your body to be doing the thing that you enjoy doing. And maybe that's enough. Instead of just thinking, if we're always thinking maximum production, what is this making? Basically, like the way you're trained in a capitalist society to think of, what is my output? Oh, there's so many self-help books, the 4-hour work week, the whatever, about how I can maximize my output. Well, like, are you having fun in the meantime? And maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's trying to say it's another version of it. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. But it really is true. Good Lord, if anybody's listening to this who's young, just like make sure that when you set, it's okay to have goals and want to get somewhere and want to produce something. But if it's not fun while you're doing it, like, just I would say don't.
Yeah, I mean, if you really know exactly what you want to get out of something, go for it. And far be it from me to give people advice about how they want to live their life if they know they have a particular goal and they need to do something unpleasant to get to it. Sure, that has its value, but definitely not overlooking farting around. Because farting around is really where it's at.
Or maybe let's say it in the reverse way. It's okay to say no to things that don't sound any fun. Like that's another big thing.
Yeah, and to say yes to things that do sound a lot of fun. Like, I feel like there's a tendency there too to something sounds really fun. You're like, oh no, I can't do that. That's way too fun. That's not for me. I spent my whole early 20s hitchhiking and listening to rave music and doing really dumb shit and not having any money. It was great.
That's great. So
it was
how
awesome.
Do you feel any, because I think some people could look and say, oh, I farted away all this time because it didn't result in anything. I'm not any richer, financially or anything because of it. But so that, maybe we can get into the looking back portion of the middle-age existential crisis.
Sure.
Do you feel, how do you feel about the time until now? And I think it's interesting to ask, do you have regret? And then in a general sense, do you think that regret is a useful emotion to let yourself feel or focus on?
So I can unequivocally say that, well, let's say what I can equivocally say. Equivocally, I can say. I'm equivocating a little bit. But that my early 20s, like hitchhiking around, listening to rave music, and having very few cares was, in many ways, my idealized self. There was a year or so that I hitchhiked in Australia. And I look back at that year and I go, that was pinnacle. That was peak Ryan Hoger.
But could it have persisted, like, forever?
I intended it to.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. You never know. You can't know what didn't happen. And that's just how it is. I have no idea how it would have gone when I got back to the States.
And maybe to put too fine a point on it, is that when Kid entered the picture?
Yes.
Is that what derailed that?
When I came back from...
So this wasn't a choice.
No, I would have continued to hitchhike around in the United. My visa ended in Australia. Came back to the United States. Was fully intending to just keep bumming around the United States. I have no idea whether it would have gone as well as it did in Australia, but instead, I met my wife. We had a child. And then that was the end of that. And so it's pretty easy to talk about that Australia year, but kind of part of the same last couple of months is realizing that next several years, when I got a massage therapy license and started pursuing energy therapy and Reiki and polarity therapy and, a lot of very woo-woo kind of stuff, because I was a very woo-woo kind of person at that point, and trying to make that work financially as well, because it was very much my truly held worldview was that everything is vibration. You can affect it with your mind, and in a very real and immediate fashion. And I still, I guess, fundamentally believe those things, but I also recognize that sitting around going, is probably not the best way to get, like, say, financial success, for example.
Fair enough, yeah.
It's not rational.
Well, some people can,
Some people can.
And they're usually charlatans that end up making that work.
And see,
like
so this
Deepak Chopra types, yeah.
Which, and I was into Chopra at this point. And also, some of it is going back and realizing how suggestible I was at this stage in my life, because I'd just come from this, I want to say, legitimately wholesome community of hippies and hitchhikers who really watched out for each other and had each other's backs and loved each other in Australia, and then got into massage therapy and was very ripe for being taken advantage of, because you think that the world is like that. And that's not necessarily true. But so then, as a massage therapist, I tried to make it work as a massage therapist doing energy work, and I was actually doing pretty good work. Like, I had a number of clients, and I actually just ran across a newspaper clipping about my massage therapy practice from back then. I'm getting ready. I'm packing up my stuff to move right now, and I just happened to run across this newspaper clipping talking about how this lady had never been pain-free for 10 years. And she had an hour and a half session with me, and then she was pain-free, and she's like, wow, that was amazing. I was like, so I can look back at that and say I was doing really good work in the massage therapy practice. And then I tried to take it that one step further into something that didn't make sense and wasn't very explainable. It was basically I think it was using energy work to unlock your latent abilities as an artist and a creative, and all you had to do was pay me $1,500 a month and devote your entire life to it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Okay.
And I was very excited.
Becoming a cult leader.
Exactly. And that was actually the original plan when I got back from Australia. I'll throw that out there too. One of the first things I did, the weekend I got back from Australia, was I was talking to an ex-girlfriend, and I said, hey, so I think I'm going to start a religion. You want in? And she was like, yes. Whatever religion you're starting, I'm in. And I was like, okay. And I think I realized pretty quickly that what I would be taking on with that, and then I never did it. But then, a couple of years later with this thing, I decided to do it again. I'm like, would you go cult leader? Cult leader? Am I going to go for cult leader? I think that work.
Somewhere in the multiverse, you have armies of jihadis conquering the planet.
Yeah, pretty much.
Using energy mind weapons.
And so my upshot here is from my middle-age vantage point, right? I'm looking back at myself then and how that thing failed, and realizing that that version of myself, that couple years where I was trying and struggling to support my family with this while still staying true to my values, because of my financial failure, I have all this contempt for that me. I don't feel that for the guy that was in Australia just fucking around. He's on a pedestal, but the guy after that, trying to transition from being completely without responsibilities to responsibly providing for his family, that guy, I'm like, oh, you failed.
Yeah, the concept of becoming different people over a lifetime, I think this is where myself, I've gotten hung up on it at some points, And I think a lot of people get hung up if you're really attached to your identity and your ego. You can say, well, I need to continue being this person and operating in these same patterns moving forward. And you really do, like, you cannot possibly understand this until you get older, but you become different people over time. Different, there's some tendencies that hang around. But yeah, I hadn't considered having contempt or admiration for the other versions of yourself. As far as whether or not, I guess you could call that regret if you have contempt for a past version of yourself. Like, fuck that guy. He got me into trouble here. And that's not necessarily, I think a lot of, maybe power of positive thinking types would try to get you out of thinking about that. But that kind of discontent is fine. Like, this is where I depart from the Buddhists in some respect, because if you're perfectly content, you're just going to sit on a cushion. Like, discontent is fuel for movement. If it truly is you saying, no, screw this, I need to get from this place to another place, but you can use discontent as rocket fuel to get you out of there. This is what one of my friends who was Mormon was talking, or still is Mormon, was talking about.
He was Mormon, but he still is too.
He still is too. I used to be Mormon, but I still am too. He was talking about, well, the people that leave the church are always so unhappy. They're not the happy people. As if this confirmed the validity of, and I'm like, well, yeah, in order to tear yourself away from something you have these hardcore emotional attachments to, you need to have a tremendous amount of discontent. Like, there's no other way to get out. Like, the only reason that I didn't continue being in my religious cult of whatever evangelical Christianity was that I had a tremendous amount of discontent that was the rocket fuel to get. You have to reach escape velocity from your emotional ties to these stupid places that that your ego finds itself in.
Hey, I heard JFK Jr. was showing up in Dallas. You want to go check it out?
Oh yeah, didn't he not do that? Or maybe
they're still waiting.
Maybe his flight got delayed,
maybe,
or it crashed. Well, can you imagine if the QAnon people were right, and then he just died in a plane crash on the way there? That would be the ultimate irony.
Anyway. Back to the show.
Yeah, but then attachment to, you also can't have too much attachment or nostalgia for the past self that you really enjoyed. I know I've surprised myself. I've always had this nomadic inclination, and I've surprised myself as I've gotten older where I'm like, I don't really feel like nomading as much. I kind of just want to be in one place and do something consistent and watch that grow, and maybe that's okay. I wrestle with, feeling like, oh no, maybe I've stagnated or something. But another part of that, and this comes with looking forward from middle age, is this is something I don't enjoy about growing up. I feel like the novelty certainly wears off. Like, there's just not that many new experiences. Like, yeah, I could go travel around a whole bunch, but I've been places. I have an idea. I've never been to Spain, but I've got an idea of what going to Spain would be like. And there would be small things that would surprise me, but not in the same way that when you're young. And certainly there was a period in my life from teens through early 20s where I was having like major epiphanies regarding life, myself, and reality on a fairly regular basis. And when you have an epiphany, it's like the entire world has changed, if it's significant enough. And those are pretty rare, if not non-existent at this point. It's kind of like all the big thinking and big realizations are over with, and you might not be physically stuck in the same place, but you're in the same place more or less mentally. And that settling out is something I wrestle with, because I question myself. Am I getting lazy? Am I getting too stagnant? Or is this just, you've matured, welcome, you finally are, you've reached the destination.
And then it comes back to that question of aesthetics. Like, I feel like that's one thing that's, I didn't say it at the time, but that's something I think you're just zeroed in right there, is that really aesthetics is the most important thing. Sure, you're going to spend most of your time at this point kind of waiting for the next important thing. Like, I'm buying a house right now. I've got 5 days to kill till it closes. Like, we got to pack, but that doesn't take all day. So, like, I guess we'll make a podcast.
Yeah.
A couple hours, have a beer. And what can I do that's an aesthetically pleasing way to pass the time in between important milestones?
Yeah. Well, what do you think? What pastimes or ways of filling the moments in between the minutia of everyday life do you feel like are wasted time versus like that was pleasing and I'm glad I spent my time doing this? You know, if we put. Because I don't know, I waver on it. Sometimes I'll sit down, I'll play some video games, and I'll feel like, oh god, that was a waste of 2 hours. I should really be doing something else. And then other times I'll be like, that was satisfying and fun, and I'm not sad that I did that.
I think it's that the way you feel about it when you're done. That's really the biggest one, because it's really all about the moment. You know, there's no pre-prediction. Sometimes sitting there cutting your toenails is like the best thing.
I know. That is one thing that happens. Oh my God. Just the pleasure you take in small comforts as you get older, right? I was so much more resilient, and now I'm just like, I check into a hotel, and I'm like, the sheets are soft. Like just these little...
man, the pillows, though.
These little things become so much more like an order of magnitude more important. How do you think about this? Let's get into a little bit of what is different about your life living in parent land versus mine.
Okay.
I had the feeling at one point that I don't think I have now, but I felt like, golly gee, I'm struggling with what to do with my life and getting a sense of meaning out of it. And if you have children, well, there's your answer, right? It's this very obvious thing that's in front of you. Just take care of these things and do well by them, and that will take up all your time, and that will feel meaningful, and that'll kind of be a solution to the existential problem is having kids. To what extent? No.
Definitely takes up all your time.
It definitely takes up all your time.
It definitely takes up all your time. It doesn't feel meaningful. I'll tell you a story from this morning. My kiddo got up. You know, my kid has to leave for school at 8:50. So he woke up at about 8:10, which was a little late, but whatever. He slept until 8:10. That's fine. He comes down and snuggles me for a few minutes, which is great. It's like, okay, kiddo, you gotta go get ready for school. Okay, yeah, okay. Goes, and this is Yuri, by the way, who we discussed earlier. He goes and eats breakfast, and he got dressed after some prompting, and then he goes to go to the bathroom, and he's in the bathroom for half an hour, and it turns out he snuck a laser pointer in there, one that we used to play with the cat, and he snuck the cat into the bathroom too. And so he's saying, I'm going poop,
we've had a
but
freeze
actually
again.
What he's doing is, oh yeah, I see that. Oh, there we go. It's back.
Okay.
Maybe. You good?
Yeah, it just is it's been okay, but the internet here is not the most fantastic. So it had a hiccup there. So just if you want to restart from waking up.
Yeah, okay.
With the kid.
So he wakes up about 8:10. He comes down to snuggle me. A little late. He's got to go to school at 8:50, but he comes down to snuggle me. He snuggles me for like 10 minutes. It's great. It's fine. Okay, kid, you got to go get ready for school. After much prompting, he goes up and changes his clothes, gets dressed, comes back down. Okay, I got to go poop. Okay, kiddo, go poop. He goes to the bathroom. Turns out he sneaks his cat and also a laser pointer into the bathroom with him. And instead of getting ready for school, he's sitting on the toilet for 20 to 30 minutes playing with the laser pointer and the cat in there. And after a while, it's like, well, dude, are you what's happening? Are you constipated? Can you get out? Like, are you done? What's happening? And so that's and then it turns out that no, he's been playing with the cat the whole time this last half hour, and now it's time for him to go to school, but he is not dressed and he's playing with the cat with a laser pointer on the toilet. And so that's what most of the interactions with raising this child is
Yeah.
I'm attempting to get him educated, but he is in the bathroom sitting on the toilet playing with the cat instead. And so it's hard to see, like, you know, the deeper meaning most of the time. There's some moments of great understanding and delight, and like, I have these children and they're going to grow into adults and they're incredible children. Most of the time you're like, can you please stop screaming poop, and then wondering what the fuck you're doing with yourself.
I think it's funny that I asked this really like a macro level question about how what the meaning is that this adds to your life, and you zoomed in on this one tiny moment, presumably because, like, you say, if you want to look at the meaning of the whole thing, well, let's look at a part. And that part is this nonsense, and parenthood is a series of these nonsensical moments. So how am I going to zoom out from that, you know, and say what the meaning of the entire enterprise is?
And every once in a while it comes at you. Holy shit. Like probably the biggest one for me is, and actually this is a good one to compare with you, is that time seems to, the years just fly by. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's largely to do with the fact that I have a counter. Oren was born 11 years ago. Yuri was born 8 years ago. So I'm like, how long ago was that? How old is Oren? And so I have the very much a sense of the passage of time.
It must, yeah. I definitely have a greater sense of time speeding up as I've gotten older, but having a sort of clock, in this case it's a growing Homo sapien that is showing you exactly what the passage of time is, must bring it right into the forefront. I'll tell you what also did it to me is just what we do for work, where we have 1 month on for work and 1 month off for vacation. And it's like when your months are so, the months of your life are so clearly demarcated, like month, you've got this ticker going off, and you look at a 20-year career and you're like, okay, what's, 20 times 6, 120. I've got 120 of these things left, and it's like, there went one, there went another. You don't have a lot. There's this fantastic calendar you can get online. I think you can print it out. That's like your expected human lifetime in weeks. And if you look at it in weeks and little blocks, it ain't a lot. It's not terribly much.
Yeah. And I feel like we get that. That's another aspect of, just as you get older, you start getting necessarily, you start falling into more routine. Like we're talking about earlier in your life, you have all this novelty and things are constantly changing and you're learning new things. And then you start getting older, and more soon or less soon, depending on what you do with your young adult years, you get into something regular. And then once you get into something regular where you can really count the seasons, they start going.
So maybe part of the midlife existential crisis is, yes, you get into more routine. Yes, things are more, I guess you could say monotonous. They're usually not changing, certainly nearly as much as when you're younger. But you also have a sense of time passing faster and faster. So for me, that's like, there's a lot more urgency with certain things. Like, by rights, I probably should have stayed living in Los Angeles a little longer and waited for my girlfriend's business to settle out. But I was just like, going back to aesthetics, I don't like it here, and I don't have time. I can't tick off another year in this place that I don't enjoy. And that's how I feel about things now. Like, the second my job becomes something which I absolutely get, no pleasure out of, fuck it, right? Yeah. The thing I say to people, I think it's too dramatic, or I say it to myself as well, is like, I'm dying, right? I have a terminal disease, okay? I don't know when it's up, but I can feel it in my body. I'm getting older, and there really is no time to waste. So I have so much less patience for, finishing a book that I don't enjoy. I cannot put up with things that feel like a a waste of my time that I'm not enjoying. Like, it's just, there is not much time left. So I think that probably is those two opposing forces of things kind of settling in, but also you perceiving time and things feeling more urgent, and you looking around and saying, oh, shoot. It's like when you're about to leave the house on a vacation. You're like, oh, wait a second. We're only leaving 24 hours. Is there anything I forgot to do? Is there anything else that needs to get done? And that's kind of the stage I'm in right now, because you figure after 60, you're just coasting. Sorry to anybody who's over 60 that's listening to this. I basically just said you might as well be dead. But yeah, so that last, I'm going, okay, I still have my faculties. Like, I'm still here. I still have some intellectual and physical faculties to spend. And some time to spend, and what on earth are we going to spend these things on? I think that's a natural, the midlife crisis is looked down on, but I think it's a natural and healthy and inevitable thing that you're going to run into. It's interesting that you're getting into it now, because I see a lot of people who are parents, they hit this stage when the kids get out of the house. And then they look over at, this is when a lot of divorces happen. They look over at their wife and they go, I don't know that I really enjoy being with this person. Or they go, I don't know if I like driving this car. I don't know if I like this job. I just see it happen all the time, that people don't allow themselves any reflection because the kids are the mission until the kids are gone. So maybe you've kind of preempted that.
I hope so. We're definitely aware of it coming on. We definitely see it coming. I mean, I don't anticipate a reason to not stay with my wife after the kids leave, but we also, even at the outset, we said we got 25 years in us for sure. That was our original plan. Like, yeah, we got 25 years in this. No problem. Yeah. After that, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about relationships in the context of everything we've been speaking of, because on the one hand, why would you ever stick around a relationship that you're not enjoying? On the two hand, if by this age, hopefully you've been in a relationship where sticking through the times that it was unpleasant ended up having a pretty big payoff at the end in terms of maturing and closeness and all that. So I still, even at this stage, I don't know how I feel about lifetime commitment. I'm not married. I'm with a long-term partner. And it seems disingenuous to me to say, oh, I'll stick with you until you're dead. Because, I don't know, maybe not. But who knows? Who knows what's going to happen to us in life? Who knows how I'm going to change as a person, how you're going to change as a person? I don't know. I don't know how to think about it.
There's a good Alex Gray quote. Alex and Allison Gray had a really good quote with that, and which also reaches back into Buddhism as well, that there's a fear of commitment in the sense that, okay, once I've committed to this thing, I can't change my choice. Mm-hmm. And that's true. But there's also a freedom in commitment in that you don't have to think about other options anymore. Suddenly all that mental bandwidth of, am I in the right relationship? Am I in the right job? Am I doing the right things goes away, because it doesn't matter whether it's the right thing. It's the one you're doing.
Yeah.
Because you chose it. And the actual quote was, choose once, stop choosing. And I think I don't necessarily 100% subscribe to it, but I do think it's very powerful.
Yeah. I remember. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. A lot of the best decisions I've ever made have been something like that, where, when I decided to go into the military as a translator, that was me doing that, at least for the next 5 years. You don't have other options, practically speaking. I mean, sure, you could get out, go to jail, try to kill yourself, you could take some extreme measures, but really, you're not going to do that. You've closed the doors to it. And same thing with deciding to go to school for 4 years to get a certain career, and you're committing yourself to that. I remember before I ever made that commitment to the military, so before 23, I just felt completely overwhelmed. How do you make a choice about what to do with your life and how to spend your time? How on earth do you do that? And anything I would do, I would always be bugged by this nagging thing in the back of my head about, well, is this the right thing to be doing? And it would sap your energy. And the truth of the matter is, this is the advice I would give anybody who is like young and in that same position as me. I would be like, just make choices and keep moving, because
Just make a choice.
because you don't because you're not even committed a lot of the time in the way that you think you are, because you just don't know where the hell this thing is going. What a choice gives you is momentum. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in exactly the right direction, unless you have a very specific goal to become a brain surgeon or something. But you might not get there. You might. So, yeah, I definitely I hear that could be very, very freeing in a relationship, of not just, should I be with somebody else? Should I nope. Just push that completely out of the back of your mind so that you can experience what comes out of this. It's like deciding to build something or grow something. You can't build a house and be questioning the plans that the architect made in the middle of the fucking thing.
Eventually you gotta just say, we made this choice, this is what we're doing. But then you do of course have to balance that with, going back to the relationship example. Okay, you can get in abusive relationships and get in there pretty deep and still need to extricate yourself in order to live the rest of your life. And being able to tell the difference is legitimately difficult. So that's why it's like, if you use your architecture example, you get halfway through, you've laid the foundation, you've put all the roofs, you found out there's not enough bedrooms. Shit, you need to figure something. You need to figure something out now.
So there's that caveat.
It's why I don't 100% subscribe to it. But as an ideal, as a philosophy, I think it's really powerful. As a rational tool, I think it has, as an actual daily tool, I think it does have limits.
Yeah. So are there things now that you've been thinking about how you're going to spend your time until 60? Are there new things that you're committing yourself to in that vein? That you've said, all right, I've got the lay of the land. I'm this old bastard. I'm going to be getting older, and are you reorienting any of your energies and pointing them somewhere in a new direction?
There's definitely been I'd say there's been more of a process of shaking out the things that are not that important to me. I find that, when I was I wanted to be a professional artist, like a visual artist, from when I was 5. Like, I knew what I wanted to do, and I pursued that, went to art school, didn't finish, but I went. And probably the fact that I didn't finish art school has had the biggest impact on my life's trajectory of anything I can think of. If I had finished art school, it would have been a very different deal. But so that has stuck, still making visual art. I feel like finally at 37, I finally have something I want to say with it, which was a lot of my issue in the late teens, early 20s, is not really having a message. Now I finally have something I want to say with it. And then it becomes a question of, okay, do I want to build an audience with it, or do I even give a shit? Do I just want to make it? So that's kind of the question, the big question that occupies me regarding that, as I turn into an older bastard.
Yeah.
Is, do I actually give a fuck if anybody sees it?
Yeah. The do I have something to say, I think, is a natural place to get to at this age. Do I have something to pass on? Because if you think about kind of the natural evolution of a human life, probably why Homo sapiens live to, a decent amount past their reproductive age is so that you can help the other people that are coming up. So I think we have a natural teaching instinct. And I definitely have a compulsion to write to somebody, this imagined person or people that are in the circumstance I was in when I was young, to help them move further and faster than I did. Where I'm looking back at life and I'm saying, golly gee, I could have had a better life. I wish I had known these things. I wish there had been somebody that took me by the hand and said this, that, and the other thing to me, and then to become that person. You see people do that, some version of that, as they get older. My cousin, who lives here in Jacksonville, Florida, actually helped me have a lot of had a really good insight that helped me have some compassion for my own parents, because I'd had some contempt for their sort of dogmatic religiosity that they put on me when I was young, and she said, because she's known them obviously since before I was born. She said, they had a tough life, and then they found something that worked for them, and that's why they're so insistent upon it for you. And it's like, oh, well, obviously, I had not thought about it in that compassionate way, but obviously that's true, that their religion and their way of looking at the world was the thing that they found that helped them get out of a place that they didn't want to be. And that's why they're trying to put it onto their children. So whereas I don't care for it as an ideology, at least it came to me in an attempt to love and not in an attempt to control.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely have that, and I don't have my own children to put that into, but I feel that instinct, and that's where I'm hoping that maybe the podcast or some writing and these things that I'm starting to dabble into can lead to. Of course, you go, well, maybe that's just, do I care if anybody reads this? Or it seems silly to try to intervene in anybody else's life path and say, and presume to help, given all of the uncertainties that we've laid out in even carving out what the hell a life path is.
But then you look back, like I can look back and have a few artists that totally changed my life, And if I'm able to touch one person growing up to the point where it actually alters their worldview to see the images I've created, which I know is possible because it's happened to me.
Yeah.
Well, shit, that's a life well lived right there.
I think more so, I've been saying like advice, more so than advice, I would say like it's so important to communicate viewpoints. Because everybody has a unique window onto this thing, and communicating your viewpoint. This is what my favorite intellectuals, people that I read. They have a way of looking at things. Like Terence McKenna's one. I don't agree with everything Terence McKenna says. I don't agree with all his theories or anything like that. But he has a viewpoint. I like looking through his glasses. I like seeing the world through his prism, and that might be if I can get. How far out on a woo-woo limb do I want to go here?
Go far.
Yeah, go. Let's go. Let's go till we start to hear the bow crack. If what we're all doing is the universe waking up and being conscious and looking at itself from different angles, I think that it's what else is meaningful other than communicating the angle that you're looking at things from. You're like a little space explorer out there and saying, here's what I see through my telescope, and here's what I see through my telescope. We're all fucking arguing and saying that your telescope is bullshit. And but in a way, viewed the proper way, even though I don't think my parents' claims to religious truth are true, there is a valuable way in which you can look at their particular lens that they're looking at, through the world through. And I hope that's, if I communicate anything, that it wouldn't be any sort of dogma or advice or self-help, but just like, hey, here's how I see things. Because those people have been incredibly helpful to me, the ones that have communicated their view on the world. And I'll go, oh my goodness, I hadn't looked at it from that angle. And that will lead to the epiphany that gets me to the energetic breakthrough that gets to the next thing. I feel a responsibility to do that. I feel a burden to not keep all of this to myself. Because I do. I feel like I've been through a transformation, just coming out of religion. Not a lot of people do that.
It's true.
Not a lot of people do that. I don't think me right now talking to 20-year-old me, I think we would seem like strangers sitting across the table from each other. I don't think many people have gone through a complete and utter like mental, spiritual transformation into what feels like a totally different identity. And so if I can get that across and help somebody that's going through that sort of transition and make them feel like less afraid of what's happening to them, maybe that would be useful. Well, I want to say that I hope you do something like that. I hope you put more of your viewpoint out into the world. And what is your art except for a window into the holding the kaleidoscope of Hoger up to my eye and seeing what happens when it tumbles around.
It's pretty trippy.
I told you I was going out on the limb. We're out there, man.
We're out there. Actually, it makes me think of an idea for a couple more episodes that might be worth doing. we could do one on the book you're going to write and do one on the pictures I'm painting.
Yeah. What would you want to talk about with your stuff?
Oh, the philosophy behind it. It's pretty fleshed out at this point. More than I'd want to get into on this one because we're talking about something else. I have to totally derail it to talk about what I'm doing there.
Okay. Yeah, Roger. No, I'd absolutely want to hear about that. My philosophy with this going forward is if like we're interested in having fun, that's probably the best that we can do. To not really anticipate any sort of needs of an audience or whatever. That if we're enjoying ourselves, it's probably going to be a good time. Is there anything else I wanted to put on the point of the middle age thing? I think that there's an emotion that I don't know if it's inevitable getting to this age or if it's the result of being me and my choices, which is just like I felt really deeply as a younger person, and it's fading away a little bit just because your zeal for everything fades away. Maybe that's maturity or slow death. But maybe they're the same thing. But I cared deeply about life, and that even goes into when I was very, very like misdirected as a youth and trying to care deeply about life through converting people to the ways of Jesus. But I felt like, my goodness, look at this thing. I can't believe we have this, whatever on earth this is, and who knows what this is. It certainly represents a seemingly quite unique opportunity, right? Even if I persist as consciousness itself over time, this whole Ryan Eastwick on planet Earth thing is a short-lived event. So God damn it, we'd better do this well. And when you're young, of course, there's this omni possibility in front of you, and you're trying to get as much motion as you can and go in a direction, and new things are happening, and the stars are whizzing by your little starship here. We have a lot of momentum. As you get older, you go, well, is that it? That was it. That was the thing. Okay. And maybe that's just a little bit, I don't want to call it disappointment, because I'm not disappointed with life, but it's like when you get really, really hyped up for a movie or something you're looking forward to, and then it's never as good as the anticipation. Let me say that. Like Christmas or whatever you're looking forward to, it's never as good as the hype you put up to it. And so I'm like, maybe if I went back and did things differently, I could have been a swashbuckling pirate in another country or something more out there, something more intense, you know what I mean, than what happened.
But you know what? I pretty much did that, and the moment I look at pictures of myself when I was in Australia, spinning fire, hanging out, touring with bands, and I looked pretty grumpy.
Yeah, that is true, man. Your base level, and I think this is like a physiological fact, is your base level of happiness. We all have a variation in that waveform of I'm happier now and I'm sadder now. But the average, the trend line for humans, it's just kind of a dial that's set. You know, I am basically usually about as happy in any circumstance as I am. But I want to be able to look back and be like, I did the thing. Like I did, and that's the urgency I feel in middle age, and the energy that I hope I carry forward is like not settling in and being like, okay, I'm at this stage where I'm like, have I given enough? Have I done enough? I've got this reserve of energy left, and I would rather be a little too crazy and do a little too much than too little and settle out just yet. Like let's give this thing a little more gas.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that. Personally, I'm pretty and the kids may have something to do with it, but personally, I'm pretty content that whatever like the mission is, the temple of the life that's going to be built, whatever that is, that's probably not going to happen till my 60s. That's pretty much where I'm at there.
What's not going to happen to your 60s?
Like whatever the sort of temple of my life is, the accomplishment, whatever it is, like the full gift that the fully mature, like blossom that I'm going to offer to the world, that's not going to be till I'm in my 60s. Like I'm still just figuring shit out.
You know, if you
I think
get
that's a lot of it, is getting older and getting to this middle age point and being like, shit, man, I just barely know enough to get like buy a house and like do my plumbing.
I know. Can you believe, like, I'm at the age where all the other, like, brilliant people who have ever lived already did their shit, you know? Like, how old was Einstein? Younger than me, you know?
20s.
And you're just like,
Oh
oh,
my
God damn. How did you know how to do things?
Yeah, you look at science especially, and a lot of those breakthroughs were
A lot of those people were,
young men.
yeah, a lot of those breakthroughs and people accomplishing things. I hope I can remember this specifically enough to convey it, but there was like an article I read on different kinds of genius, right? It's of course authored towards some conceited asshole who thinks that they have some genius in themselves and is trying to convince you that I didn't waste it, it's coming for me. But there really are that conceptual type of genius, like where Einstein's thinking about, you know, the speed of light and how that relates to gravity and relativity. That tends to happen fairly young. And when I think about my conceptual breakthroughs, those did happen fairly young. It was a very young, boisterous, energetic thing to do. But then there's a different type of creative genius that once you have gathered all the experience and your perception of time, that you can finally write that novel or whatever that means something that's a little slower and needed you to get to this point. So I think I did my conceptual work, and it's time to get into the other type of work.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you can't write a good novel without writing about a bunch of shitty ones first.
Yeah.
I think it was Frank. I think Frank Herbert started writing Dune when he was in late 50s, early 60s.
Look at all these geniuses that blossom when they're older. Frank Herbert, Colonel Sanders, famously didn't start KFC until he was, I think, 65 or something. He was an old bastard. In the fried chicken kitchen of life. Yeah.
And falling short of recommending waiting. Like, I certainly wouldn't recommend waiting. But I guess this whole episode has maybe been a little bit sort of trite. Everything's going fine. But I feel like at this stage in our lives, we kind of need that. We need somebody sitting across from us in a Zoom meeting or reminding us that everything is going at its proper pace.
Yeah, well, it goes, you look around and go, oh my gosh, is everything okay? Am I doing the right things? And then you think to yourself, well, how else would it be? How else would this look like at this stage? It would look exactly like this. So it's okay to have a midlife existential crisis. Man, we didn't get into I did some research I watching a 45-minute lecture on the cultural and anthropological roots of the midlife crisis and our popular conception of it. And so how the typical midlife crisis, I view I just want to touch on this briefly, but like what I think the typical midlife crisis is, you know, I think the epitome of this was this guy, my friend's dad, when I was a little kid. I'll never forget this asshole. He divorced his wife. Well, his kids were about your kid's age. And then he showed up to pick my friend up from our house some months later, and he had dyed his hair black and gotten an earring and was driving a red convertible Mustang. And he was just the absolute picture of the midlife crisis and how to do girlfriend and the whole thing. And how on earth does that seems to be like a misplaced idea of what your value is. You're obviously like, oh, my virility is going away and I need to confirm that again, right? But it also is, to me, I just see these people and you didn't do any of this self-reflection when you were younger? Really? Like,
Yeah, I ran into that a lot when I was younger, that I'd have older family friends, you know, I guess older than we are now, but I guess not that much. Fuck. So I guess not that much older than we were now. Saying, man, you're really thoughtful for your age. Like, that is unusual. And being like, why wouldn't you think about your place in the universe starting as soon as you can imagine it?
Yeah, like, what's your... Yeah. I think people get into it. I honestly do. It's like bizarro. You see people get into these I'll just call it a tunnel, just a routine where they're just totally blind to anything on either side of high school and college and family. And that's why sometimes when the kids move out of the house or people retire, they have these big existential crises, or some of these old bastards keep working into their 80s, because sometimes it's out of love for what they're doing, but a lot of times they literally say, oh, I wouldn't know what else to do with myself. I have no other identity past this. And I'm just like, oh my God, you didn't do any of this reflection in your early age. So if anything, if I want to put a positive spin on my late blooming, I feel like career and certainly retirement savings wise, I'm about 10 years behind the normal human trajectory, because you and I just started in what's probably going to be our final careers about 4 years ago, at age 37. So yeah, I'll just call that, I got all of my crisis. I think I got what would be the typical midlife crisis. I think I got that over with when I was younger, and now I'm having the type of midlife crisis that can only come through the perspective of time and physically getting older. That's something you cannot, I don't care how much you try to imagine it when you're younger. You can't imagine what it feels like to have that much time under you, that much water under the keel behind you.
Yeah, really, it's not a something you can imagine. It's a felt experience.
Yeah. Because now I know what a century feels like. I can look at history and go, yeah, okay, I've been around for a third of one of those. I get it. That's not very much time.
It's not very much time at all. It's very fast. And really, speaking of, on that note, like what you were saying about what we think of as the typical midlife crisis, and kind of what we were talking about earlier with how much of this is situational and how much of it is, I guess, biological or mental, or however you want it, more personal, and how much of it is just situational, with that idea of what is the typical midlife crisis. So what we're thinking of is the boomers and their parents, and that's it. That's the only generations we have to go off. And yes, that is definitely the typical midlife crisis for those generations, but I don't know if that was a thing at all for even one generation before that. It could be that whole conception of the midlife crisis is a really very 20th century, and that ours and our generation's experience of it could be completely different. And there's so many things that we take for granted, what we were talking about earlier, that we're in petroleum shipping. That was not a thing 120 years ago. Like this, a couple generations ago, our industry as it stands today didn't even remotely exist. And the number of industries and job descriptions that have risen and vanished even just in our lifetimes. Switchboard operators, typists. I mean, a calculator wasn't a device, it was a job 70 years ago. And how with that rapid change of what is happening, and I don't know if it's even possible to tease out what is situational and what is sort of a universal human experience.
Yeah, in that way, I think you're on point. That lecture I was watching about the social roots of the midlife crisis, you start to hear it talked about, I believe it's the 1920s or 30s, that this concept of midlife crisis comes about. And part of it definitely has to do with how your life is structured within this, I want to say society or the economy, within the social economy. For a man, for example, you're being told that your worth is in your job and economically providing for your family and all of this. But then you have these very distinct stages of, now I have starting a career, and then I have retirement, and you've got these. So now I've got this retirement point where I have this existential crisis. And for women, you become a spinster. Oh, I can't have children anymore. So once your biological clock has ticked over, you don't have any more value as a woman in the popular conception. And so they would have a midlife crisis because their value that society's telling them they should have has gone away. Whereas in the past, I think that there weren't these distinct demarcation lines. I think, let's say you were a blacksmith 300 years ago, you probably just kept being a blacksmith until your hands stopped working. There wasn't a retirement or anything. What is this midlife crisis you're talking about? You just got up and did what needed to be done every day until you probably physically couldn't do it anymore.
And then you did whatever you could do.
Right, and then you probably just kept contributing in whatever way you could. So yeah, it is a more modern sort of disease. And I wonder why that's probably the reason too that we generally like look at midlife crisis with a it's definitely a negative term. You hear midlife crisis and it's like a negative mocking term, and I think that's the reason that it is that way, is we look at that person and we just say, grow up. Like, why did you not get over this when you were younger?
Though even, our hypothetical 17th century blacksmith, I'm sure faced very similar feelings. You start hitting your 30s and you go, wow, I'm kind of at the peak here. And I see my teacher who can no longer lift his hammer. And I see my children who are just beginning to take it up. And I mean, it's not like the people 300 years ago had less. And I think conceptually, this is one of the easiest mistakes to make. It's not like people living 300 years ago had less complicated thoughts than we did.
No.
There's an equal depth and complexity to Greek society. Really, you get into Greek history at all, and just Greek and Roman history at all, and just the depth of the society and the similarity to what we have going on now. Like the casual similarity, just down to the graffiti and the rude comments in Senate proceedings and whatnot. Mm-hmm. It's like, wow, this is really just the same thing with iPhones.
Something I feel like. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yep.
No, that's pretty much the end of the thought there.
Yeah, something I feel like is unique to Western culture is our youth fetishism. That's got to be another ingredient in the soup. Because Allison, my girlfriend, lived in Taiwan for a while, and she just could not believe how well older people live there. They're venerated, they're appreciated, they're provided for. They have being an old person in Taiwan is apparently sweet. And I feel like in America, once you get to a certain age, people are like, "Ew, could you go fix that at the plastic? Like, why don't you even care about trying to not look old?"
Stop making those smells.
Yeah, we don't give, who wants their parent, who's happy about their parents living with them when they're older or anything like that. We do have a bit of youth fetishism here that, taken to its extreme, you end up as some of the more,
I think I lost you.
Good Lord. Allison was showing me Madonna's Instagram. Sorry, your video, again has stopped. Let's see if it comes back. Oh, there we go.
There you are.
Okay.
Yeah, a little youth fetishism is where
Allison was showing me Madonna's Instagram lately. Good Lord, it's horrifying.
Is it bad? That's too bad, because she could have been good.
Oh, it's bad. Oh, it's bad. She's like bending over and showing her ass, and her face just looks like the thing where someone saran wrapped the shit out of it, and some of it's plastic surgery, and some of it's plastic surgery, and some of it's I'm sure Photoshop or something like this, but it's just this picture of neurotic American youth fetishism that's gone really completely awry.
Yeah, because when she changed her name to that witchy thing or whatever a few years ago, I was like,
oh God, I missed that.
Yeah, no, she started picking up more of like a matriarchal vibe 5 or 6 years ago, and started running with that, and it was like, fuck yeah, become a matriarch. That's what you should do, Madonna. Spend your young years being a sex symbol, and as you get older, stop doing that and start being a symbol of an older woman.
No, she is still.
She doesn't have to give a fuck.
She is still trying to be a sex symbol. She wants you to look at her Instagram and be like, "Man, I really want to fuck that. I should buy her album."
It's too bad.
And it's so bizarre because I wish you could sit these people down and have a conversation with them, because I'm like, surely you have enough money. Surely you have enough fame. What in the actual fuck are you doing? Maybe that's the person. So here's the person that never went through the midlife crisis, but maybe they should have. They never made any attempt to face head on the feelings that you have as you get older and what your relevance and mission in life is.
Yeah, what you can continue to do. And that's definitely somewhere where I feel like women take the brunt of the societal expectations. There's definitely an accepted path for men to get older and get gray, and the Dos Equis guy, and there's definitely an accepted path to get
the Dos Equis guy. Because
exactly, right?
Because we can still make babies.
Exactly. That's probably the root of it. And there's definitely, I mean, it's growing, but there's definitely less of a path for women to do that with societal respect, and there's just constant hammering on staying young for women.
Yeah, it's
we face, but not like that.
No. I mean, it is definitely easier to age gracefully as a man in the eyes of society. I'll give us, ladies, a feel for you.
Yeah,
you look beautiful even without makeup on.
Yeah, that's true.
You smell nice too. You look good today. Just play this part over and over again. Here you are. I'll start a new podcast where Ryan just compliments and encourages you. So I'm sure those exist. I'm sure 100 of those exist now that I think about
it. There's even another Ryan doing it.
Is there? Which one is that?
We need to get Ryan Creamer on this show.
Ryan Creamer?
Do you know Ryan Creamer?
You're not saying Kramer. You're saying creamer as in coffee creamer.
Pretty sure it's Creamer. He's the guy who has Pornhub videos where he just
Jesus Christ.
the women. Have you seen this guy? It's amazing. He starts a Pornhub video and
wish we had like a Howard Stern or a Joe Rogan thing going on. I'd be like, Jamie, bring that up.
Bring that up, right? No,
Show
I'm gonna look
Ryan
at Madonna's
Creamer.
Instagram, and you're gonna check out Ryan Creamer. He's got videos on Pornhub, right? And in which the lady arrives with their pizza, and he takes the pizza and tells them to have a nice day.
Oh, that's funny. Okay.
Their makeup looks good, and then they leave.
That is really funny.
It's really great. And
I see. Okay. I see what's going on now. Yeah.
And he videos are titled Ryan Creamer positively supports your choices, things like that.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
It's really delightful. And
I was thinking it was just him like staring into the camera, telling you you're beautiful today or something like this. But
no, it's situational positivity. It's great.
Yeah, it's like what women would like out of it, right? I know so much of male porn. I'm told, is like not only stroking your dick, it's stroking your ego. Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're the greatest thing. Looking at the camera, greatest thing, and I can't hang with that. It's just too fucking cheesy and ridiculous. I'm just like, do your fucking job. Do what I'm not paying you to do on this free website.
That I'm insisting I receive.
I'm sorry to any family members that have made it this far.
Really, our friends.
I'm sure they've heard enough of me talking.
We should probably just cut this.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe the end of that just gets chopped.
But no, Ryan Creamer is really great.
Chopped right off. Ryan Creamer. Okay. I'll have to.
And he's another Ryan, so we could potentially invite him on as a host.
Yeah. Well, let's think of an excuse to get.
We could do a whole episode on toxic versus meaningful positivity.
Okay. I'm into this. And it would, it would bolster his brand for our wide audience.
Yeah. Jamie, write this down.
Yep. Write this down. Put it in the meeting notes. Remind me on Monday. All right. Well, I think that's feeling the end of this thing.
No, that's pretty good. I think we've dissolved into nonsense.
Yeah, that's how you know. We come from nonsense, and into nonsense we shall degrade.
This has been the RyAngle Podcast. Music by Tallac, Tallac. You can find more music by him at soundcloud.com/IamTallac.